The morning sun cut through the Georgia pines like copper wire, casting long shadows across the tactical training facility 20 miles outside Atlanta. Sarah Collins stood at the edge of the firing range, her eyes tracking the movements of a dozen men in tactical gear as they cycled through drills with military precision. The air smelled of gun oil and pine sap, a combination she'd grown to associate with focus and discipline. Max sat beside her, his amber eyes alert, his body still. The Belgian Malinois had been her partner for 7 years, and in that time they'd become something more than handler and K9. They were extensions of each other. She read his body language like a book, and he anticipated her commands before she gave them. "Ma'am, the range is reserved for federal training today." The range master approached, clipboard in hand, his tone professionally dismissive. He was a thick-necked man in his 50s, the kind who'd spent decades in tactical training and had seen everything twice. Sarah turned to face him, her green eyes steady. "I was invited." "Invited?" He glanced at his clipboard, then back at her, skepticism written across his weathered face. "I don't have any civilians on today's roster." Before Sarah could respond, a voice cut through the morning air with the kind of authority that made people stand straighter without thinking about it. "She's not a civilian, Matthews. She's here on my invitation." Sarah turned to see a man approaching from the facility's main building. He moved with the easy confidence of someone who'd spent a lifetime in dangerous places and survived them all. Silver threaded through his dark hair, and his blue eyes held the kind of intelligence that missed nothing. He wore simple tactical pants and a dark polo, but there was something about him that suggested he'd be just as comfortable in a tuxedo. James Bond extended his hand. "Agent Collins, thank you for coming." Sarah shook his hand, her grip firm. "You didn't give me much choice, Mr. Bond. Your message said it was urgent." "It is." Bond turned to the range master. "Matthews, I'll need lane 12, the advanced tactical setup." Matthews hesitated, glancing between Bond and Sarah. "Sir, I know what it is." Bond's tone remained pleasant, but there was steel underneath. "Lane 12, please." The range master nodded and walked away, muttering into his radio. Sarah watched him go, then turned back to Bond. "You want to explain what this is about? Your people were very cryptic. Walk with me." Bond started toward the far end of the range, where a separate structure stood apart from the main firing lines. Max fell into step beside Sarah, his ears forward, attentive. "Beautiful dog," Bond observed. "Malinois, correct? 6 years old. Best partner I've ever had." Sarah's hand dropped instinctively to Max's head, her fingers scratching behind his ear. "He saved my life more times than I can count. I've read your file. Both of your files, actually." Bond stopped at the entrance to lane 12, turning to face her fully. 7 years with Atlanta PD, 43 successful K9 operations, 18 high-risk warrants executed without a single civilian casualty, 2 commendations for bravery, and last year's incident at the Peachtree Plaza. Sarah's jaw tightened slightly. The Peachtree Plaza hostage situation had been national news, a domestic terrorist with 17 hostages and enough explosives to bring down the entire building. She and Max had gone in through the ventilation system, an approach so dangerous that her captain had tried to stop her, but they'd gotten everyone out. Everyone except the terrorist. "That was a team effort," Sarah said quietly. "Your captain says you disobeyed direct orders. Went in alone with just your dog." Bond's expression remained neutral, but there was something in his eyes. Evaluation, calculation. That could have been a career-ending decision. "It saved 17 lives." "It did." Bond opened the door to lane 12. "Tell me, Agent Collins, why did you really take that risk?" Sarah followed him inside, Max staying close to her left leg. The tactical setup was unlike anything she'd seen before. The range extended 200 yards, but it wasn't a simple shooting lane. Holographic targets flickered at various distances, some static, some moving. Obstacles created an urban environment, building facades, vehicles, civilians. I took the risk because it was the right thing to do, Sarah said, her eyes scanning the sophisticated setup, because lives were at stake, and I had the training to make a difference. And if you died, then at least I would have died trying. Sarah turned to face him directly. Mr. Bond, with all due respect, you didn't bring me here to discuss ancient history. What do you want? Bond smiled, a genuine expression that softened the calculating intelligence in his eyes. Direct. I like that. He moved to a control panel on the wall, his fingers dancing over the touch screen. I brought you here because I'm retiring, Agent Collins. After 30 years of service, it's time to pass the torch. Sarah blinked, caught off guard. I don't understand. Pass the torch to who? That depends on the next few minutes. Bond finished his inputs and stepped back from the panel. MI6 has been watching you for the past year. Your skills, your instincts, your unconventional approach to impossible situations. We've been looking for someone special, someone who can think outside the box, who isn't bound by traditional methodology, who has the courage to make the hard calls. Ooh, the holographic targets flickered to life throughout the range. Sarah counted at least 20 distinct scenarios playing out simultaneously. Hostage situations, active shooters, moving vehicles, innocent bystanders mixed with armed threats. You want me to join MI6? Sarah's heart rate increased slightly, adrenaline beginning to flow. This couldn't be real. I want you to try out for a very specific position. Bond handed her a weapon from the rack on the wall. A Walther PPK, the classic MI6 sidearm. The position of 007. The words hung in the air like a physical thing. Sarah took the weapon, her hands moving automatically to check the magazine, the chamber, the weight and balance. It was perfect, custom-built, precision-tuned. You're serious? Completely. Bond leaned against the control panel, arms crossed. The world has changed, Agent Collins. The threats we face today require agents who can adapt, who can think differently. For too long, MI6 has recruited from the same pool, military officers, intelligence analysts, career diplomats. But you're something different. You're a street cop who became something more. You understand real people, real threats, real consequences. Sarah's mind raced. James Bond, the James Bond, was offering her the chance to become 007. It was insane. It was impossible. It was... What's the test? She heard herself ask. Bond smiled again, this time with something that looked like satisfaction. The range is programmed with 27 scenarios. Some require immediate action. Some require patience. Some require you to hold fire. You'll have exactly 5 minutes to navigate the course and neutralize all legitimate threats while avoiding any civilian casualties. That's impossible in 5 minutes. For most people, yes. Bond pushed off from the panel. But I didn't bring most people here. I brought you and him. He nodded toward Max, who sat watching the conversation with intelligent eyes. Sarah looked at her partner, then back at the impossible maze of targets and obstacles. Every instinct told her this was crazy. She was a cop, not a spy. She had a good life, a good career in Atlanta. This wasn't her world. But then she thought about the Peachtree Plaza, about the 17 lives hanging in the balance, about the choice she'd made to go in, despite the orders, despite the risk, because it was the right thing to do. Can Max come with me? She asked. I was hoping you'd ask that. Bond's expression turned serious. Traditional MI6 doctrine would say no, but if you're going to be the new kind of agent we need, you need to work the way that makes you most effective. If that includes your partner, then so be it. Sarah nodded slowly. She looked down at Max, who gazed back at her with absolute trust. 7 years of partnership, 7 years of having each other's backs. Whatever happened next, they'd face it together. How do I start? Bond gestured to the entrance of the tactical maze. The scenario begins when you cross that threshold. The clock starts automatically. Remember, some targets need to be eliminated, some need to be avoided, and some need to be protected. Choose wisely. Sarah moved to the starting position, Max falling into perfect heel position beside her. She took 3 deep breaths, centering herself, letting her training take over. This wasn't so different from a high-risk warrant, she told herself. Just 27 of them at once, in an environment designed by one of the world's most legendary spies. No pressure. "Agent Collins?" Bond's voice stopped her just before she entered. "One more thing. In the real world, you won't always have 5 minutes. Sometimes you'll have 5 seconds. The question isn't whether you can make the shot. The question is whether you can make the right decision fast enough to matter." Sarah nodded, absorbing the words. Then she stepped across the threshold. The world exploded into motion. Holographic targets materialized everywhere. Armed assailants in a bank robbery, civilians running in panic, a sniper on a rooftop, a car careening toward a crowd. The scenarios layered over each other, creating a chaotic symphony of threats and innocence. And Sarah had exactly 5 minutes to sort through it all. Her training kicked in immediately. She moved through the maze with fluid precision, the Walther an extension of her hand. Max stayed at her side, his body low and ready, his eyes tracking every movement. First scenario: bank robbery, 3 armed suspects, 12 hostages. Sarah's eyes scanned the scene in less than 2 seconds. 2 suspects had clear shots. The third was using a hostage as a shield. She dropped the first 2 with double taps to center mass, then held fire on the third. Instead, she signaled Max forward with a subtle hand gesture. The Malinois moved like lightning, his holographic counterpart materializing in the scenario. He hit the third suspect low and hard, pulling him away from the hostage. Sarah's shot took the suspect down before he could recover. Scenario complete. 4 seconds. She moved immediately to the next, active shooter in a shopping mall. But something was wrong. The shooter had no weapon visible. Sarah held fire, circling to get a better angle. There, a phone in his hand raised toward the ceiling. Not a gun. A civilian in panic. She moved on. Correct decision to hold fire. The scenarios came faster now. A car chase with armed occupants. She took out the driver and front passenger, stopped the vehicle before it could hit the crowd. A rooftop sniper. But when she reached the position, she realized it was a police counter-sniper, not a threat. She held fire and moved on. 3 minutes down, 21 scenarios cleared. Max alerted suddenly, his body tensing. Sarah trusted him implicitly and dove right, just as a holographic threat materialized from what had appeared to be an empty doorway. Her shot was instantaneous, muscle memory and trust in her partner combining into perfect execution. The final scenarios were the hardest, a terrorist with a dead man's switch, surrounded by civilians. Sarah had to make the impossible choice, take the shot and risk civilian casualties if the switch triggered, or let the terrorist maintain control. She studied the scenario for precious seconds, then made her decision. She signaled Max to create a distraction from the left while she moved right. When Max's holographic form drew the terrorist's attention for just a fraction of a second, Sarah's bullet hit the terrorist's hand, destroying the switch before it could be triggered. High risk, unconventional, effective. The final scenario cleared with 17 seconds to spare. The holograms vanished. The range fell silent, except for Sarah's controlled breathing and Max's soft panting. She stood in the middle of the tactical maze, weapons still ready, her mind reviewing every decision, every shot, every choice to hold fire. Bond's slow clap echoed through the space as he emerged from the control room. 27 scenarios. 27 correct decisions, 0 civilian casualties, and you finished with time to spare. He stopped a few feet away, his expression unreadable. In 30 years of service, I've never seen anyone clear that course on their first attempt. Sarah lowered her weapon, engaging the safety automatically. Did I pass? You did more than pass, Agent Collins. Bond extended his hand again, but this time there was something different in the gesture. Respect, acknowledgement, perhaps even a hint of relief. Welcome to MI6. If you accept the position, you'll become 007, the first woman to hold that designation, the first agent with a K9 partner, the first of a new generation. Sarah looked at the hand, then at Max, who gazed up at her with complete trust. This would change everything. Her life in Atlanta, her career with the police department, every plan she'd ever made for her future, all of it would be left behind for a world she barely understood. But she thought about those 17 people at the Peachtree Plaza, about all the people she'd helped over 7 years as a cop, and she thought about how many more she might be able to help as 07. She shook Bond's hand. "I accept." Bond's smile was genuine. "Then we have a lot of work to do. Your training begins tomorrow at MI6's facility in Virginia. It won't be easy. In fact, it will be the hardest thing you've ever done. We'll push you beyond every limit you think you have. But if you survive it, you'll emerge as one of the most dangerous people in the world. Are you ready for that?" Sarah looked around the tactical range one more time, at the maze of scenarios she'd just conquered, at the weapon in her hand that had felt so natural, so right. Then she looked at Max, her partner, her friend, her family. "We're ready," she said. And somewhere in the back of her mind, a small voice whispered that nothing would ever be the same again. But Sarah Collins had never been afraid of change. She'd only ever been afraid of standing still while the world needed help. The shot that had silenced the range was just the beginning. The real test was about to start. The MI6 training facility in Virginia looked nothing like Sarah had imagined. No grand colonial architecture, no obvious security presence, just a sprawling estate that could have passed for a wealthy family's country home, complete with manicured gardens and a long driveway lined with oak trees. Only the discreet security cameras and the subtle reinforcement in the windows betrayed its true purpose. Sarah arrived at dawn, Max beside her in the passenger seat of the rental car. She'd spent the last week tying up loose ends in Atlanta. Resignation from the police department, storage arrangements for her apartment, difficult goodbyes to her captain and fellow officers. None of them knew the real reason she was leaving. As far as they were concerned, she'd accepted a position with a federal security contractor, vague enough to be believable, boring enough to discourage questions. A woman in her 40s waited at the entrance, blonde hair pulled back in a severe bun, dressed in practical athletic wear. Her posture suggested military training, and her eyes assessed Sarah with clinical efficiency. "Agent Collins, I'm Commander Victoria Hayes, head of tactical training." No handshake, no smile. "You're 3 minutes early. Good. Follow me." They entered through heavy oak doors that concealed reinforced steel. The interior was a strange blend of elegant English manor and cutting-edge military facility. Classical paintings hung on walls that likely housed surveillance equipment. Antique furniture sat beside doors that required biometric scanners. Hayes led them through a series of corridors, her pace brisk. "Your training will last 12 weeks. Most recruits get 6 months, but we don't have that luxury. The world doesn't stop turning while we train new agents." She glanced back at Max, who trotted calmly beside Sarah. "The dog stays in the kennel during academic sessions." "With respect, Commander, Max stays with me." Sarah's tone was polite but firm. That was part of the agreement. Hayes stopped abruptly, turning to face Sarah. "This isn't the Atlanta PD, Collins. This is MI6. We have protocols. And I have a partner who's saved my life multiple times." Sarah met her gaze steadily. James Bond approved Max's participation. "If that's changed, I need to know now." For a long moment, Hayes studied her, the silence stretching. Then something shifted in her expression, not quite approval, but acknowledgement. "Fair enough. But that dog answers to my commands during training exercises, understood?" "He answers to mine," Sarah replied. "But we work as a team. Give us the mission parameters, and we'll execute." Hayes's lips twitched, not quite a smile, but close. "You've got spine. I'll give you that. Let's see if you've got the skill to back it up." She resumed walking. "Your quarters are on the 3rd floor, East Wing. You have 1 hour to settle in. Training begins at 800 sharp in the combat facility. Do not be late." Sarah's room was spartanly furnished. A single bed, a desk, a private bathroom, and a small area with a dog bed for Max. A dossier sat on the desk with her name on it. She opened it while Max explored the space, his nose working overtime to catalogue every cent. The training schedule was brutal. Combat training from 0800 to 1200. Academic sessions on international law, terrorism tactics, and intelligence gathering from 1300 to 1700. Weapons training from 1800 to 2000. And that was just week 1. Each subsequent week added more: advanced driving, technical operations, languages, survival training. At the bottom of the schedule, a handwritten note: if you survive this, you'll be ready. If you don't, you weren't right for the position anyway. JB. Sarah smiled grimly. Bond hadn't been exaggerating about pushing her beyond her limits. The combat facility turned out to be a converted aircraft hangar, its vast interior transformed into a multi-level training ground. Climbing walls, obstacle courses, hand-to-hand combat rings, and what looked like an urban warfare simulation zone filled the space. 20 other trainees were already present. 19 men, 1 other woman, all looking like they'd been carved from granite. Hayes stood at the center of the main combat ring, her arms crossed. Collins, front and center. Sarah approached, Max heeling perfectly beside her. She felt 19 pairs of eyes tracking her movement, assessing, judging. She'd been the only woman in plenty of situations before, but never quite like this. Everyone, this is Agent Collins. She's here to try out for a 00 designation. Hayes's voice carried through the entire facility. I know what you're thinking. A street cop with a dog competing for the most elite position in the service. Seems unlikely, doesn't it? A few snickers rippled through the group. Sarah kept her expression neutral, her body language relaxed. She'd learned long ago that the best response to doubt was performance. Collins, you see that man? Hayes pointed to a massive trainee on the far side of the ring, easily 6'4" and 240 pounds of muscle. That's Agent Morrison. Former SAS, 12 years of combat experience. He's going to try to hurt you now. Your job is to stop him. No weapons, no dog, just you and your training. Morrison stepped into the ring, cracking his knuckles. His smile was predatory. Nothing personal, love, just following orders. Sarah handed Max's lead to Hayes and stepped into the ring. Her heart rate increased, but her mind remained calm. She'd taken down bigger men before. Size was an advantage, but it also meant slower reflexes, larger target areas, and often overconfidence. Begin, Hayes commanded. Morrison came at her like a freight train, all power and aggression. Sarah didn't try to meet force with force. That would be suicide. Instead, she moved like water, redirecting his momentum, using his size against him. When he threw a haymaker, she ducked under it and struck his kidney. When he tried to grapple, she targeted his knee with a precise kick. But Morrison was good, really good. He adapted quickly, cutting off her angles, forcing her into corners. A glancing blow caught her shoulder, spinning her halfway around. Pain radiated down her arm. Sarah used the spin, adding to its momentum, and her elbow caught Morrison square in the jaw. He staggered and she swept his legs. The big man went down hard, and Sarah was on him instantly, her forearm across his throat, her knee pinning his arm. "Yield!" Morrison gasped. Sarah released him immediately and stood, offering her hand. Morrison took it, letting her help him up. His jaw was already swelling, but his eyes held respect now. "Not bad, love," he admitted. "Not bad at all." Hayes nodded, her expression unreadable. Adequate, but in the field, adequate gets you killed. Again, this time, Morrison, don't hold back. They went 3 more rounds. Sarah won 2, lost 1. By the end, she was bleeding from a split lip. Her ribs ached from a body shot she hadn't quite avoided, and her legs trembled with exhaustion. But she was still standing. "Acceptable," Hayes said, which Sarah was learning was high praise from the commander. "Everyone else, pair up. Collins, you're with me." The next hour was a masterclass in humility. Hayes moved like a viper, fast, precise, utterly unpredictable. She put Sarah on the mat 7 times in 30 minutes, each time exploiting a weakness Sarah hadn't known she had. "You telegraph your kicks," Hayes said, helping Sarah up for the 7th time. "Your left guard drops when you throw a right cross, and you favor your right leg. Old injury?" "Car accident 3 years ago." Sarah wiped blood from her lip. "I thought I'd compensated for it." "You have, but a trained opponent will still spot it. We'll work on it." Hayes studied her for a moment. "You're good, Collins. Better than I expected. But good isn't enough for a 00. You need to be exceptional, understand?" "Yes, ma'am." "Good. Now let's see what your partner can do." The K9 training session was different. Hayes brought out a heavily padded decoy suit, and for the first time that morning, she smiled, a predator's smile. "Show me what Max can do against an armed assailant." Sarah ran Max through his paces, attack commands, release commands, protection work. Max performed flawlessly, his training and natural instincts combining into something beautiful and terrifying. He took down the padded decoy 3 times, each time releasing instantly on Sarah's command. Impressive. Hayes removed the helmet, her face flushed from exertion. But can he operate independently? In espionage, you won't always be in the same room. They spent the next hour working on advanced commands, sending Max ahead to scout, using hand signals for silent communication, teaching him to trigger specific alerts for different threats. By the end, even Hayes looked satisfied. The academic sessions were equally demanding. Sarah learned the organizational structures of international terrorist networks, the legal frameworks that governed MI6 operations, and the ethical gray areas where agents often found themselves. The instructors were former field agents, and their war stories were both thrilling and terrifying. "Remember," one instructor said, a scarred man named Phillips, who'd lost 2 fingers in Beirut, "in the field, you won't have lawyers and oversight committees watching your every move. You'll have seconds to make decisions that might haunt you for years. The question isn't whether you can make the hard calls, it's whether you can live with them afterward." Weapons training revealed new dimensions to Sarah's education. She'd been an expert with standard police firearms, but MI6 operated on a different level entirely. Exotic weapons, assassination techniques, long-range precision shooting, explosives, each day brought new skills and new responsibilities. "A 00 designation carries the license to kill," the weapons instructor explained, demonstrating the disassembly of a suppressed sniper rifle. "But that license comes with tremendous burden. You're not a soldier following orders. You're an independent operator making life and death decisions in the field. Every kill must be justified, necessary, and proportional. But you won't have time for committee review. You'll have your training, your judgment, and your conscience." The weeks blurred together in a haze of exhaustion, pain, and incremental improvement. Sarah learned to speak passable Russian and Mandarin. She mastered advanced driving techniques that turned vehicles into weapons. She studied bomb-making and bomb disposal, cyber warfare and counter-surveillance, seduction and interrogation. But the hardest lessons were the ones that challenged her fundamental nature. "You're a cop at heart," Hayes told her during week 6, after a particularly difficult scenario where Sarah had hesitated to eliminate a target who'd surrendered. "You want to arrest people, read them their rights, give them their day in court. But that's not how this works. Sometimes the court is you, the verdict is instant, and the sentence is final. Can you live with that?" Sarah didn't answer immediately. She thought about the Peachtree Plaza terrorist, the man she'd killed to save 17 hostages. She'd lost sleep over that decision, even though she knew it was right. "I don't know," she admitted finally, "but I'm willing to find out." Hayes nodded slowly. "Honest answer. Better than a cocky one." She handed Sarah a dossier. "Week 7 starts tomorrow. You'll be going into the field for a live exercise. Low risk, but real. We'll see how theory translates to practice." The operation was an intelligence-gathering mission in Washington, D.C. Sarah had to infiltrate a diplomatic reception, make contact with an asset, and extract information about a suspected arms dealer. Simple on paper, terrifying in execution. She wore an elegant black dress that concealed a compact Walter and a communication device. Max stayed behind. This was a mission that required subtlety, not force. Sarah felt naked without her partner, but she understood the necessity. The reception was filled with diplomats, politicians, and the kind of people who moved in circles where power was currency. Sarah moved through the crowd with practiced ease. Her cover identity as a defense contractor consultant holding up under casual scrutiny. Her asset was a nervous Pakistani diplomat who'd approached MI6 with information about his country's intelligence service selling weapons to terrorist groups. They met in a quiet corner, made brief small talk, and exchanged information hidden in a business card handshake. The entire interaction took 90 seconds. Sarah was halfway to the exit when she spotted a face in the crowd, a man she recognized from her intelligence briefings, Alexei Volkov, a Russian arms dealer with ties to at least 3 terrorist organizations. He wasn't supposed to be here. His presence meant something had gone wrong. Her training kicked in. She altered her path, maintaining her cover while moving to a position where she could observe Volkov without being obvious. He was talking to a US senator, a conversation that lasted too long and looked too friendly. Sarah activated her communication device, reporting the observation. Hayes's voice came back immediately. "Maintain observation, but do not engage. We'll handle it from here." But then Sarah saw something that made her blood run cold. Another man approaching the senator and Volkov, her asset, the Pakistani diplomat, looking panicked. Everything happened in slow motion. The diplomat reached into his jacket. Sarah saw the gun before anyone else did. She had maybe 3 seconds to make a decision. Her training said, maintain cover, let the security forces handle it. But her instincts, the ones that had made her a great cop, said innocent people were about to die. She moved. The gun was coming up. The diplomat's face twisted with desperation, or madness, or both. Sarah crossed the distance in 4 strides, her hand catching his wrist, redirecting the weapon toward the ceiling. The gun fired, the sound deafening in the elegant room. Screams erupted. Security forces converged. Sarah had the diplomat on the ground in seconds, the weapon secured, her knee on his back. It was only then that she realized she'd just blown her cover completely. Hayes was going to kill her. The debrief was exactly as brutal as Sarah expected. She sat in a conference room at the MI6 station in D.C., facing Hayes and 2 other senior officials. Her elegant dress was rumpled, her makeup smeared from the struggle. "You were ordered to observe only," Hayes said, her voice cold. "Instead, you engaged an armed subject in the middle of a diplomatic reception, exposing yourself and potentially compromising ongoing operations. Explain." "People were about to die," Sarah said simply. "I had the training and position to stop it. I did. You had a cover identity to maintain. You had orders to follow. I had 3 seconds to decide between following orders and saving lives. I chose lives." One of the senior officials, a thin man named Carmichael, leaned forward. "And if your intervention had gotten those people killed, if the diplomat had fired into the crowd while you were trying to disarm him, then that would have been on me." Sarah met his gaze steadily. "But sitting back and watching it happen wasn't an option I could live with." The room fell silent. Hayes and Carmichael exchanged a long look. Finally, Hayes stood. "You're done here. Pack your things. You'll be on a transport back to Virginia in the morning." Sarah's heart sank, but she kept her expression neutral. She'd failed. Despite all the training, all the skills she'd acquired, she'd failed the one test that mattered. Could she be the kind of agent MI6 needed? Apparently not. She returned to her temporary quarters, expecting to find her gear packed and her career as a spy over before it had really begun. Instead, she found James Bond waiting for her, a bottle of scotch and 2 glasses on the table. "Heard you had quite the evening," Bond said, pouring 2 measures. "I blew it." Sarah took the offered glass but didn't drink. "I couldn't follow orders when it mattered." "On the contrary," Bond raised his glass. "You passed the real test, the one we don't tell recruits about because if they know it's coming, it doesn't work." Sarah blinked. "I don't understand." "We wanted to see what you'd do when your training conflicted with your instincts. When following orders meant potentially watching innocent people die." Bond took a sip of his scotch. A lot of recruits would have followed orders. They'd have maintained cover, filed a report, and slept fine that night. Those people make excellent intelligence analysts, but they don't make double O's. So I didn't fail. You did exactly what we needed you to do. You made the hard call, accepted the consequences, and saved lives. Bond set down his glass. Tomorrow, you return to Virginia for the final phase of training. In 4 weeks, if you succeed, you'll be designated 007. The world will become your area of operations, and you'll face decisions far harder than tonight. But now we know you'll make them based on what's right, not what's easy. Sarah finally took a sip of the scotch, feeling its warmth spread through her chest. What if I'd chosen differently? What if I'd followed orders? Then you'd be packing your bags for real, and we'd be looking for someone else. Bond stood, moving toward the door. Get some rest, Agent Collins. The hard part is just beginning. He paused at the threshold. Oh, and Sarah, your asset survived, and we intercepted intelligence about a major arms deal because of your intervention. Not bad for your first field operation. After he left, Sarah sat alone with her scotch, her mind replaying the evening's events. She'd nearly been dismissed for the same instincts that had just earned her praise. The contradictions of espionage she was learning were vast and confusing. But one thing was clear, she was still in the game. The final 4 weeks of training were the most intense yet. Now that Sarah had proven she could make the hard calls, Hayes pushed her into scenarios where every option was terrible, and the best outcome was merely less catastrophic than the alternatives. She learned to live with moral ambiguity, to accept that sometimes victory looked like minimizing casualties rather than preventing them entirely. She learned to compartmentalize, to complete missions and process the emotional weight later. And through it all, Max remained her anchor, the one constant in a world of shifting loyalties and impossible choices. On the final day of training, Hayes called Sarah to her office. The commander stood at the window, looking out over the estate grounds. Your scores are exceptional, Hayes said without preamble. Top percentile in combat, tactics and fieldcraft, high marks in academics, and you've demonstrated the judgment necessary for independent operations. She turned to face Sarah. Tomorrow, you'll be officially designated 007. Congratulations, Agent Collins. Sarah felt a surge of pride mixed with trepidation. Thank you, Commander. Don't thank me yet. Hayes handed her a sealed envelope. Your first assignment. A terrorist organization called the Syndicate is planning an attack on Atlanta during next month's global summit. MI6 has been tracking them for 6 months, but we need someone on the ground. Someone who knows the city, who can move through it invisibly. Sarah opened the envelope, scanning the briefing documents. The Syndicate, a loose network of international terrorists united by anti-Western ideology and a talent for spectacular violence. Their suspected leader was a man known only as Corvus, Crow in Latin, whose real identity remained a mystery. Why Atlanta? Sarah asked. Because it's your home. Because they want to prove nowhere is safe. Because the summit represents everything they hate. International cooperation, Western values, democratic ideals. Hayes's expression was grim. They're planning something big, Collins. Something that could kill thousands. You and Max are our best chance at stopping it. Sarah closed the file, her mind already working through the logistics. Atlanta, her city, her home, now a battlefield. When do I leave? Tomorrow, after the designation ceremony. You'll work with a local MI6 station, but operational authority is yours. 00 agents operate independently for a reason. You'll have the freedom to pursue the mission as you see fit. Hayes paused. And the responsibility when things go wrong. That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. She stood at her window, watching moonlight paint the estate grounds in silver, Max sleeping peacefully on his bed nearby. Tomorrow she would become 007, joining a legacy that stretched back decades. Tomorrow she would receive the license that made her one of the most dangerous operatives in the world. But tonight she was still Sarah Collins, the cop from Atlanta who'd somehow stumbled into the world of international espionage. She thought about James Bond's words during her first day. The question isn't whether you can make the shot. The question is whether you can make the right decision fast enough to matter. And in 12 weeks, she'd learned to fight, to kill, to deceive, and to survive. But the real test was coming. Not in a training facility with safety protocols and oversight, but in the real world where her decisions would have permanent consequences. Sarah looked at Max, her partner, her friend. Together they'd faced every challenge the training had thrown at them. Together they'd proven that unconventional didn't mean ineffective. Tomorrow they would become 07. And then they would go home to Atlanta to hunt terrorists in streets. Sarah knew better than anyone. The Syndicate had made a mistake targeting her city. They just didn't know it yet. Atlanta looked different through the eyes of a spy. Sarah stood on the rooftop of an office building in Midtown, watching the evening traffic flow like blood through the city's arteries. She'd grown up here, worked these streets for 7 years, knew every neighborhood and back alley. But now she saw it differently, not as a city to protect, but as a battlefield to navigate. Max sat beside her, his tactical vest equipped with MI6's latest technology. Micro cameras in his collar, chemical sensors in his vest, and a communication relay that let Sarah see what he saw through her smart glasses. They'd spent the last week integrating the technology, learning its capabilities and limitations. "Collins, you there?" The voice came through her earpiece. Daniel Park, the MI6 station chief in Atlanta, young for the position at 38, Korean-American, with a mind that processed information like a supercomputer. "Present," Sarah replied, still watching the city. "What do we have?" "Possible lead. Our surveillance team picked up chatter about a meeting tonight in an industrial area near Bankhead. Could be syndicate-related, could be routine criminal activity. Either way, it's worth checking out." Sarah pulled up the location on her phone, a cluster of abandoned warehouses scheduled for demolition. Perfect place for clandestine meetings. Also a perfect place for an ambush. "Send me the coordinates. Max and I will take a look." "Collins, regulations say you should wait for backup. Regulations also say 00 agents have operational discretion." Sarah's tone remained pleasant, but firm. "I'm not going in hot. Just reconnaissance. If it's Syndicate, I'll report, and we'll plan accordingly." Park sighed. "You've been 007 for exactly 8 days, and you're already going rogue. Bond warned me about this." "Bond trained me for this." "There's a difference." Sarah headed for the roof access. "I'll check in every 30 minutes. If you don't hear from me, assume trouble." That's supposed to be reassuring. It's supposed to be realistic. Sarah ended the call and looked at Max. "Ready to go to work?" Max's tail wagged once, his version of absolute confidence. The industrial area near Bankhead had been dying slowly for decades. Empty warehouses with shattered windows, streets cratered with potholes, the occasional homeless encampment tucked into sheltered corners. Sarah parked her rental car 6 blocks away and approached on foot, Max moving silently beside her. Her smart glasses overlaid thermal imaging and structural data from MI6's satellite feeds. 2 buildings showed heat signatures, one with what looked like a homeless gathering, the other with 3 distinct sources clustered in what had once been a loading dock. Sarah moved closer, using abandoned vehicles and debris for cover. The moon was a sliver, the streetlights long dead. Perfect conditions for surveillance. She signaled Max forward with a subtle hand gesture. The Malinois melted into shadows, his camera feed appearing in the corner of Sarah's vision. He circled the warehouse, giving her multiple angles. 3 men, definitely. 2 standing guard, one sitting at what looked like a folding table. All armed, she could see the outlines of pistols, one possibly carrying something heavier. Professional stance. Alert posture. Not street criminals. Sarah activated her directional microphone, aiming it at the warehouse. The conversation came through garbled at first, then clearer as her system filtered the audio. "Timeline hasn't changed. The summit is in 3 weeks. Everything needs to be in position by then." The voice had an accent, Eastern European, possibly Russian or Ukrainian. Sarah's recording system captured every word. "What about the American authorities? They'll have security everywhere." A second voice, American, nervous. Let them. Security doesn't matter when the threat comes from inside. A third voice, cold and confident. Corvus has planned for every contingency. Our job is simply to execute. Sarah's pulse quickened. Corvus, the Syndicate's mysterious leader, this was definitely her target. And the packages? They're ready? The nervous American again. Arriving tomorrow night. Different locations. Different methods. By the time they realize what's happening, it will be too late. Sarah needed more information. Package locations, methods, timeline details. She needed to get closer. She signaled Max to hold position and began working her way toward a broken window on the warehouse's side. The glass had long since been removed, leaving an opening just large enough to slip through. She moved with the patience she'd learned during MI6 training. Slow, deliberate, silent. Inside, the warehouse smelled of rust and decay. Old machinery stood like metal skeletons in the darkness. Sarah used them for cover, moving closer to the voices. Through a gap in the machinery, she could see them clearly now. The two guards were exactly what she expected. Muscle-bound ex-military types with the 1,000-yard stare of men who'd seen combat. But the third man, the one sitting at the table, was different. He was small, almost delicate, wearing an expensive suit that looked absurd in the ruined warehouse. His hands moved with precise gestures as he spoke, and even from a distance, Sarah could sense his intelligence. This wasn't just a Syndicate operative, this was someone important. "Show me the targeting data," the small man said. One of the guards opened a laptop, turning it to face him. Sarah adjusted her position slightly, trying to get an angle on the screen. Her camera system captured images, but she needed better resolution. That's when everything went wrong. A piece of rusted metal, weakened by decades of decay, chose that moment to give way under Sarah's hand. The sound was small, barely a whisper, but in the silent warehouse it might as well have been a gunshot. All three men froze. The guards' hands moved to their weapons with professional speed. "We have company," the small man said calmly, as if commenting on the weather. "Find them. Kill them quietly." Sarah had maybe 5 seconds before the guards reached her position. Her training presented options in rapid succession. Hide, but they knew roughly where she was. Fight, but 2 armed opponents in confined space meant high risk. Run, but that meant losing the intelligence. She chose option 4, create chaos. Her hand found a piece of loose rebar. She threw it hard toward the far side of the warehouse. It clanged against metal, drawing the guards' attention and weapons toward the wrong direction. Sarah moved in the opposite direction, using the moment of distraction to put more distance between herself and the threat. But she'd underestimated the small man's tactical mind. The noise came from the east. She moved west, circle around, force her toward the loading dock. Damn, he'd read her play perfectly. The guards split up, moving with coordinated precision. Sarah found herself being herded exactly where the small man wanted her, toward the loading dock, toward the light, toward exposure. She activated her comm. "Park, I'm compromised. 3 hostiles. Possibly Syndicate leadership. Need backup at my location." 10 minutes out, Park's voice came back, tense. "Can you evade until then?" "Working on it. But 10 minutes might as well be 10 hours. The guards were closing in, their movements professional and coordinated. Sarah had seconds to make a decision. She whistled, a specific pattern that Max knew meant immediate action. The Malinois came through the window like a furry missile, 70 pounds of trained aggression hitting the nearest guard from behind. The man went down hard, his weapon skittering across the concrete floor. Sarah used the distraction. She broke from cover, moving toward the second guard. He turned, bringing his weapon up, but Sarah was already inside his guard. She grabbed his wrist, redirected the gun, and struck his throat with her other hand. He gurgled and dropped. The small man remained seated, watching with interest. "Impressive. MI6 training, I presume. The dog is an interesting touch, quite unorthodox." Sarah kept her weapon trained on him while watching the 2 guards. The first one was struggling with Max. The second was on his knees, gasping for air. "On the ground, now." Sarah's voice carried absolute authority. I think not. The small man stood slowly, his hands visible and empty. You see, Agent Collins, yes, I know who you are. This was never about the meeting. This was about you. Sarah's blood went cold. Explain. You're the new 007. The first woman, the first with a K9 partner. MI6 has been quite proud of you. His smile was cold. Corvus wanted to see if you lived up to the legend. Consider this your evaluation. Then Corvus made a mistake. You're going to tell me everything about the planned attack. Am I? The small man tilted his head. Before you decide my fate, perhaps you should look behind you. Sarah's instincts screamed warning. She spun, bringing her weapon around. 4 more armed men emerged from positions she hadn't spotted. Professional, organized, weapons trained on her with steady hands. She'd walked into a trap. The small man's smile widened. As I said, this was never about the meeting. It was about measuring you. And now I know you're skilled, but perhaps not quite skilled enough. Sarah's mind raced through options. 7 hostiles total, 2 temporarily disabled, 5 armed and ready. Max was still engaged with the first guard. Her backup was still minutes away. The odds were impossible. But Sarah had spent 12 weeks learning that impossible was just another word for difficult. Max, release! Her command was sharp, immediate. The Malinois disengaged instantly, returning to Sarah's side. His lips were pulled back, showing teeth, a low growl rumbling in his chest. Sarah addressed the small man while watching all the threats. You made 2 mistakes tonight. First, you assumed I'd come alone. My backup is 90 seconds out, and they'll have this building surrounded. Bluffing doesn't become you, Agent Collins. Second mistake, you assumed I needed to take you alive. Sarah's finger tightened on the trigger fractionally. I don't. Intelligence we can gather from your laptop and phone, but dead Syndicate leadership sends a message too. The small man's confidence flickered for just a moment. That's when Sarah heard it, the distant sound of helicopter rotors. Park hadn't been 10 minutes out. He'd anticipated trouble and called in air support. Your move, Sarah said. For a long moment, nobody moved. 7 weapons trained on Sarah and Max, her weapon trained on the small man. Mexican standoff with lethal stakes. Then the small man laughed, a genuinely amused sound. Impressive indeed. Perhaps you are worthy of the designation after all. He made a gesture to his men. Lower your weapons. We're leaving. I don't think so, Sarah began, but the small man was already moving. He pressed something on his watch and the warehouse suddenly filled with smoke, thick, choking clouds that turned the world white. Sarah heard running footsteps, shouts, the sound of a vehicle starting. She grabbed Max's harness and pushed toward where she remembered the exit being, her eyes streaming. By the time she and Park's backup team cleared the smoke, the Syndicate operatives were gone. But they'd left the laptop behind. The MI6 safe house was a luxury apartment in Buckhead, expensive and anonymous. Sarah sat at the dining table, still smelling of smoke, while Park's technical specialist worked on the recovered laptop. Encrypted, the specialist said, fingers flying across his own keyboard. Military grade, but not impossible. Give me a few hours. Park paced, his expression troubled. They knew who you were. They set a trap specifically for you. That means we have a leak. Or they're just good at their job, Sarah countered. I'm not exactly a secret. New 00 designation, first woman, K9 partner. That's the kind of information terrorist networks collect. Maybe. Park didn't sound convinced. But the timing is too convenient. You arrive in Atlanta and suddenly they're setting traps. Someone told them you were coming. Sarah thought about Hayes's words during training. In espionage, everyone was a potential threat, even your own people. Trust was a luxury, not a certainty. What about the summit security, she asked, changing the subject. If Syndicate is planning something big, we need coordination with local and federal authorities. That's complicated. Park stopped pacing, running a hand through his hair. The summit is in 3 weeks. Security planning started months ago. Secret Service, FBI, local police, private contractors. It's a massive operation with hundreds of moving parts. Trying to warn them about a nebulous terrorist threat without exposing our intelligence sources. In other words, we're on our own. For now, yes. Park looked tired. Welcome to espionage, Collins, where everything is complicated and nothing is simple. The laptop specialist suddenly sat up straight. Got something. The encryption was good, but they got sloppy with the file structure. I'm pulling data now. Images began appearing on the screen. Maps of Atlanta, diagrams of the summit venue, photographs of key officials, timing schedules. Sarah studied each one, her tactical mind processing the information. They're planning multiple simultaneous attacks, she said slowly. Not one big strike, but several coordinated ones. Maximum chaos, maximum casualties. These targeting packages, the specialist zoomed in on one file. These are professional, not the kind of thing street-level terrorists could produce. Someone with serious resources is backing Syndicate. Corvus, Sarah said. The man mentioned him. He's the key to all this. Park pulled up MI6's file on Corvus, which was frustratingly thin. Real identity unknown, age unknown, nationality unknown. We know he's been coordinating Syndicate operations for at least 2 years, but he's like a ghost. No photographs, no confirmed sightings, no real intelligence. The man tonight said Corvus planned for every contingency, Sarah recalled. That kind of confidence suggests someone with serious operational experience. Military, intelligence, something that taught him to think tactically. That describes half the terrorist leadership in the world, Park pointed out. Sarah continued studying the files, her instincts nagging at her. Something was off about tonight's encounter. The small man had been too relaxed, too confident, even when facing capture. And his comments about measuring her, it was a test, she said suddenly. What? Tonight? The whole thing was a test. Not to kill me or capture me, to evaluate me, to see how I'd respond under pressure, how I'd think, what choices I'd make. Sarah looked at Park. They're planning something specific for me, something that requires knowing how I operate. That's a disturbing thought. It's a smart one. I'm the new variable in their operation. They need to account for me. Sarah stood, moving to the window. Which means they'll try again. Another test, another evaluation. And next time, I need to be ready. The next week was a blur of surveillance, investigation, and near misses. Sarah and Max tracked Syndicate operatives through Atlanta's underground, following leads that sometimes panned out and often didn't. They stopped a weapons shipment in East Atlanta, intercepted communications in underground Atlanta, and identified 3 more Syndicate cells. But Corvus remained a ghost, and the specifics of the summit attack remained frustratingly unclear. Sarah was running on 4 hours of sleep and too much coffee when she got the call from an unexpected source, her former captain at Atlanta PD. Collins, it's Mike Rodriguez. We need to talk. Privately. They met at a diner in Little 5 Points, neutral ground where cops and civilians mixed freely. Rodriguez looked older than Sarah remembered, more grey in his hair, new lines around his eyes. You working for the feds now? He asked without preamble. Something like that. Why? Because I've got bodies showing up in my jurisdiction, all with execution-style gunshots. Professional kills, and the only connection between them is they all had ties to organized crime figures we've been investigating. Rodriguez leaned forward. You wouldn't know anything about that, would you? Sarah kept her expression neutral. The Syndicate operatives she'd been tracking had indeed been connected to criminal organizations, and some of them had ended up dead, not by her hand, but by someone cleaning up loose ends. Syndicate is paranoid, she said carefully. They're eliminating anyone who might talk to authorities. It's clean-up protocol. So you are working this case. Rodriguez's eyes narrowed. Sarah, what the hell is going on? I've got federal agents I've never heard of, showing up at crime scenes, classified orders coming down from Washington, and now my best former officer is involved in something she can't talk about. Mike, I need you to trust me. Something big is coming and I'm trying to stop it, but I can't give you details. People are dying in my city. More will die if I don't stop what's coming." Sarah met his gaze steadily. "I know it's not enough. I know you deserve answers, but right now, all I can give you is my word that I'm trying to protect Atlanta." Rodriguez studied her for a long moment. Finally, he nodded slowly. "All right. But Collins, when this is over, you owe me the whole story. If I survive it, you'll get it." That's not reassuring. It wasn't meant to be. Sarah was leaving the diner when Max alerted, a specific pattern of behavior that meant he'd detected something concerning. She followed his gaze to a car parked across the street. Through the tinted windows, she could barely make out a figure watching her. Her hand moved instinctively toward her concealed weapon, but before she could act, the car pulled away. She got a partial plate number, enough to run through MI6's systems. 20 minutes later, Park called. "The car you spotted, registered to a shell company that traces back to a Russian oligarch with suspected intelligence ties. Collins, you're being followed." "By Russians? That doesn't make sense. Syndicate is a mixed organization, but Russian intelligence wouldn't be involved." "Unless," Park said slowly, "Syndicate has backing from someone with serious state-level resources." The pieces began falling into place in Sarah's mind. The professional operations, the sophisticated intelligence, the confidence that comes from having powerful allies. Corvus wasn't just a terrorist leader. He was someone with connections to national intelligence services. "We need to know who Corvus really is," Sarah said. "That's the key to everything. Find him, and we find out who's really behind the summit attack." "Easier said than done. We've been trying for 2 years. Then we make him come to us." Sarah's mind was already working through the tactical possibilities. "He's been testing me, measuring me. Next time he does, I'll be ready. And I'll make sure he reveals more than he intends." "That's a dangerous game, Collins. It's the only game we have time for. The summit is in 2 weeks, and we're still blind on the specifics of the attack." She ended the call and looked at Max, who gazed back with absolute trust. The Malinois had no concept of espionage complexities, state-sponsored terrorism, or the moral ambiguities Sarah navigated daily. He just knew they were hunting bad people, and he was ready to do his job. Sarah envied that clarity. That night, back at the safe house, Sarah couldn't sleep. She stood at the window, watching Atlanta's lights paint the night sky, thinking about everything that had changed in the last few months. She'd gone from cop to spy, from protecting one city's streets to preventing an international terrorist attack. The weight of the responsibility pressed on her shoulders like physical force. Thousands of lives depending on her stopping an attack she still didn't fully understand, against an enemy whose real identity remained unknown. Her phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. "You did well tonight at the warehouse, but the real test is coming. Are you ready to make the impossible choice?" See Corvus. He was taunting her, challenging her, drawing her into his game. Sarah typed a response. "I'll be ready for anything you can throw at me." The reply came instantly. "We'll see. The summit approaches, Agent Collins, and with it, your moment of truth. Choose wisely." The message deleted itself as she watched, leaving no trace. Sarah set the phone down, her reflection staring back at her from the dark window. Somewhere out there, Corvus was planning an attack that could kill thousands. He was also planning something specific for her, a test, a trap, or perhaps both. The question was whether she'd be smart enough to see it coming and strong enough to survive it. Max stirred from his bed, coming to sit beside her. His presence was solid, real, a reminder that whatever came next, she wouldn't face it alone. 2 weeks, Max, she said softly. 2 weeks to stop a terrorist attack and prove that Bond was right to trust us with this. Max's tail thumped once against the floor, his way of saying he had absolute faith in her. Sarah just hoped that faith wasn't misplaced. The shadows over Atlanta were growing darker, and the storm was coming. The breakthrough came at 3 in the morning, 11 days before the summit. Sarah was in the MI6 safehouse war room, surrounded by screens displaying surveillance feeds, intelligence reports, and tactical maps. Max slept under the table, his rhythmic breathing the only peaceful sound in the room. Park and his team had gone home hours ago, but Sarah couldn't sleep. Something in the data was nagging at her, a pattern she couldn't quite see. She'd been reviewing the Syndicate cell operations, looking for connections, when she noticed something odd. 3 separate incidents: a weapons transfer in East Atlanta, a surveillance operation near the summit venue, and a safe house raid in Decatur, had all been compromised within hours of MI6 learning about them. The Syndicate had known they were coming. Sarah pulled up the operational logs, cross-referencing who had access to each piece of intelligence. The list was small: herself, Park, 3 analysts, and 2 field agents, plus, of course, whoever they'd reported to at MI6 headquarters in London. She was staring at the names when her secure phone rang. James Bond's voice came through, clear despite the distance. "Collins, status report." Sarah summarized the last week's operations, the surveillance, the near misses, and her growing certainty that Corvus had high-level intelligence support. "There's something else," she added. "I think we have a leak. Too many operations have been compromised. Someone is feeding information to Syndicate." Silence on the other end. Then, "What's your evidence?" "Pattern recognition. 3 ops, 3 leaks, all within the same 48-hour window. The common denominator is access to our operational planning." That's a serious accusation. If you're wrong, you'll damage trust within your own team. If you're right, Bond paused. If you're right, everyone becomes a suspect, including people you need to trust to stop this attack. "I know, but I had to tell you." "Good instincts. Here's what you're going to do. Nothing. Don't confront anyone, don't change your behavior, and don't share this theory with Park or his team. Continue operating as normal, but assume everything you say is being monitored. That's going to make coordination difficult. It's going to keep you alive. Traitors are dangerous, Collins. They've already chosen their side, which means they have nothing to lose by eliminating threats." Bond's voice hardened. "I'm sending someone to help. Agent Williams from our internal security division. He'll arrive tomorrow, posing as a new analyst. Trust no one else until we identify the leak." "Understood." "Understood." After Bond disconnected, Sarah sat in the silence, her mind working through the implications. Someone she'd been working with, someone who'd helped plan operations and watched her back, was actively sabotaging the mission. Every briefing she'd attended, every plan she'd shared, had potentially been compromised. Max stirred, sensing her tension. He padded over and rested his head on her knee, his amber eyes full of trust. Sarah scratched behind his ears, grateful for one relationship that was simple and honest. "Just you and me, partner," she whispered. "Everyone else is a question mark now." The next morning, Sarah attended the team briefing as usual, watching everyone with new eyes. Park looked tired but focused, running through overnight intelligence reports. The 3 analysts, Chen, Rodriguez, and Okoye, seemed their normal selves, professional and thorough. The 2 field agents, Morrison and Walker, were the same competent operatives she'd worked with all week. Any of them could be the traitor. "We've identified another Syndicate safe house," Park was saying, pointing to a location on the map. "Industrial area near Turner Field. Thermal imaging shows 3 occupants, possibly 4. Collins, I want you and Morrison to do reconnaissance tonight." Sarah nodded, filing away the information. If the leak was real, Syndicate would know about this operation within hours. "I'd like to take Max," she said. "His sensors might pick up things we'd miss." "Agreed." "Morrison, you comfortable working with the dog?" The big British agent grinned. "After watching him work at the warehouse, absolutely. That animal is a weapon." Sarah smiled, but her mind was calculating. Morrison had been in the field when 2 of the compromised operations went south. That could be coincidence, or it could be significant. Agent Williams arrived that afternoon, introducing himself as a new intelligence analyst from London. He was in his 50s, grey-haired and professorial, with the kind of forgettable face that was perfect for intelligence work, but his eyes were sharp, missing nothing. He caught Sarah alone in the hallway. "Agent Collins." I've reviewed your concerns. We'll need to run a comprehensive security audit, which will take time we don't have. In the meantime, I'll be monitoring all communications and data access. Continue your operations normally, but use this secure phone for anything sensitive. He handed her a device that looked identical to her current one. It's encrypted with protocols the traitor won't have access to. How do I know you're not the leak? Sarah asked bluntly. Williams smiled slightly. You don't. Welcome to the wonderful world of counterintelligence, where everyone is simultaneously trustworthy and suspect. He paused. But consider this. If I were the traitor, why would I reveal myself by coming here? I could just continue feeding information remotely, unless you're here to identify what we know about the leak, in which case you're already compromised and your suspicion won't matter. Williams shrugged. Trust has to start somewhere, Agent Collins. Bond trusts me. The question is whether you trust Bond. Sarah did trust Bond. It was possibly the only certain thing in her current situation. All right, what do you need from me? Keep doing your job. I'll do mine. With luck, we'll identify the traitor before the summit. Williams's expression turned grim. Without luck, a lot of people are going to die. That night's reconnaissance operation felt different from the start. Sarah and Morrison approached the safe house near Turner Field with standard caution, but Sarah's senses were hyper-alert, watching for any sign of ambush. The location was another abandoned industrial building. Atlanta had plenty of those. Thermal imaging confirmed occupants inside, but something felt wrong. The heat signatures were too stationary, too perfectly positioned. Morrison, hold position, Sarah whispered into her comm. Something's off. I don't see anything, Morrison replied from his position 50 yards to her left. That's the problem. It's too quiet, too perfect. Sarah signaled Max to move forward, using his camera feed to get a closer look. That's when she saw them. Tripwires, nearly invisible in the darkness, positioned exactly where an approaching assault team would walk. And the thermal signatures inside weren't moving because they weren't human. They were heat sources, decoys. It's a trap, Sarah said urgently. Pull back now! But even as she spoke, lights blazed to life around the perimeter. Gunfire erupted from concealed positions, not at Sarah's location, but at Morrison's. Contact! Morrison's voice was strained. Multiple hostiles, I'm pinned down. Sarah moved immediately, Max racing beside her. Her mind was already calculating. This wasn't random. Someone had known their exact approach routes, their positioning, their timing. Someone had given Syndicate everything they needed to set the perfect ambush. She reached Morrison's position to find him behind a concrete barrier, returning fire at 3 different positions. His left arm was bleeding, his face set in determined lines. How bad? Sarah asked, taking position beside him. Flesh wound, but we're outgunned, and they've got us in a crossfire. Morrison reloaded with practiced efficiency. Any brilliant ideas? Sarah assessed the tactical situation. The ambush was professional. Overlapping fields of fire covered retreat routes for the attackers, kill zones designed to maximize casualties. Whoever planned this knew exactly what they were doing. Max, scout pattern beta, Sarah commanded. The Malinois disappeared into the shadows, his camera feed showing Sarah what her eyes couldn't see. There, a weakness in the enemy position. A gap in their coverage, probably meant as bait, but it was their only option. On my mark, we move left, Sarah told Morrison. Suppressing fire, then run like hell. Max will create a distraction on the right. That's your plan? Run like hell? You have a better one? Morrison grinned despite the situation. Fair point. On your mark. Sarah waited until Max was in position, then whistled the attack command. The Malinois burst from cover on the right flank, and the Syndicate shooters instinctively shifted fire toward the new threat. Now! Sarah and Morrison broke left, firing as they moved. Bullets churned the concrete around them, but they were already through the kill zone. Max disengaged and raced to catch up, his vest showing multiple impact points where rounds had been stopped by the ballistic fabric. They'd made it 50 yards when the real trap was sprung. A van screeched around the corner, blocking their escape route. The side door opened, revealing more armed Syndicate operatives. Sarah and Morrison were caught perfectly, enemies behind, enemies ahead, caught in the open with minimal cover. Sarah's training presented the options instantly. None of them were good. They could make a stand and die fighting, or they could surrender and be executed later. Either way, someone had set them up to fail. Then backup arrived. 2 MI6 vehicles came screaming in from different directions. Park and his team laying down covering fire that forced the van to retreat. Within seconds, the tactical situation reversed. Syndicate was now outnumbered and outgunned. The shooters melted into the darkness with professional discipline, leaving behind only shell casings and the smell of cordite. Park rushed to Sarah and Morrison, his face tight with concern and anger. "Are you two all right?" "We'll live," Morrison said, examining his wounded arm. "But someone knew we were coming. That ambush was perfectly positioned for our approach route." Park's expression darkened. "We need to get back to the safe house, now." The ride back was tense and silent. Sarah kept watching Park, Morrison, even the driver. Any of them could be the traitor. The ambush had been too perfect, too specifically targeted at her and Morrison. Unless Morrison was the traitor, and this was an elaborate setup to eliminate Sarah while maintaining his cover. But his wound was real, and he'd fought alongside her without hesitation. At the safe house, Williams was waiting with a grim expression. "We need to talk, privately." Sarah, Park, and Williams gathered in a secure room. Williams pulled up data on his laptop, his fingers moving with precise efficiency. "I've been monitoring all data access since I arrived. Someone accessed the operational files for tonight's reconnaissance 6 hours before the mission brief. They also queried satellite imaging of the location and tactical assessment algorithms." "Who?" Park's voice was sharp. Williams brought up a username and access log. The query came from analyst Chen's credentials. Sarah's mind raced. Chen, young, brilliant, always the first to arrive and last to leave. She'd seemed genuinely committed to the mission. But espionage was built on deception. "We need to bring her in for questioning," Park said. "Already tried," Williams replied. "She didn't report for duty this morning. Her apartment is empty, cleaned out professionally." "She's gone!" The implications hung in the air like a physical weight. Chen had been with them for months, had access to every operation, every piece of intelligence. How much had she compromised? How many operations had failed because of her betrayal? "We need to assume everything she had access to is compromised," Sarah said. "Every safe house location, every asset identity, every operational plan. Syndicate knows it all." Which means we're operating blind 11 days before the summit," Park added. "This is a disaster." "It's worse than that," Williams said quietly. "I pulled Chen's background file. Her brother died 3 years ago in a drone strike in Syria. British intelligence was involved. She blamed MI6 for civilian casualties that included her family." "So this is revenge?" Sarah's anger was cold, controlled. "She's helping terrorists kill thousands because of a personal grudge? Revenge, ideology, money. Does it matter?" Park slumped in his chair. "We're compromised at the worst possible time." Sarah's phone, the secure one Williams had given her, buzzed with an incoming message, unknown number. "You're learning the first rule of espionage, Agent Collins. Trust no one. Even your own people will betray you. The summit approaches. Choose your allies carefully. Some of them are already my allies." "See, Corvus." He was gloating, enjoying her struggle. Sarah showed the message to Williams and Park. "He's telling us there's more than one traitor. Chen was just the one we found." "That's impossible," Park protested. "I've personally vetted everyone on this team." "And who vetted you?" The question came from Williams, his tone gentle but pointed. Park's face flushed with anger. "You think I'm a traitor? I've given 15 years to MI6, which would make you perfectly positioned to do maximum damage," Williams replied evenly. "I'm not accusing you, Park. I'm pointing out that from Collins's perspective, everyone is suspect, including me, including you." The room fell into uncomfortable silence. Sarah looked between the two men, trying to read truth in their faces, their body language, their reactions. But training had taught them all to deceive, to present whatever face the mission required. "We can't operate like this," she said finally, "suspecting everyone, questioning every decision. We'll tear ourselves apart before Syndicate has to do it for them." "So what do you suggest?" Park asked. Sarah thought about Bond's training, about trust and verification, about the impossible balancing act of espionage. She thought about Max, sleeping peacefully in the next room, unburdened by human complexities of loyalty and betrayal. "We compartmentalize. From now on, operational details are shared on a need-to-know basis only. We use different routes, different safe houses, different communication protocols than anything Chen had access to, and we verify everything independently." "That will slow us down," Williams observed. "It will keep us alive." Sarah's voice was firm. "We have 11 days to stop an attack we still don't fully understand, against an enemy who seems to know our every move. The only advantages we have are surprise and misdirection. So we become unpredictable. We stop playing their game and force them to play ours." Park nodded slowly. "It could work if we move fast enough, if we're careful enough, and if we're lucky enough," Williams added. "Which brings me to my next point. I've been analyzing the intelligence we have on the summit attack, the multiple simultaneous strikes, the professional planning, the state-level resources. This isn't just Syndicate. They're the operational arm, but someone bigger is backing them. Someone with serious geopolitical interests." "The Russians?" Sarah asked, thinking of the car that had followed her. "Possibly, or another power that benefits from destabilizing Western alliances." Williams pulled up new data. "The summit is bringing together leaders from NATO countries, plus economic partners from Asia and Africa. An attack that kills dozens of world leaders would reshape global politics for decades." "So we're not just stopping a terrorist attack," Park said slowly. "We're preventing a potential world war." "Exactly." Williams closed his laptop. "Which means we can't fail, not even a little bit." Sarah spent the next hour reviewing everything they knew about the summit attack, looking at it with fresh eyes now that she knew Chen had been compromising their intelligence. What had been misdirection? What had been real? Where were the gaps in their knowledge? One thing became clear: they were still blind on the most critical details: timing, method, exact targets. All they knew for certain was that multiple attacks were planned, and the summit was the ultimate target. It wasn't enough. Not nearly enough. She was still working when Morrison knocked on her door, his arm properly bandaged now. "Heard you're going solo for the next phase. Thought you might want backup you can trust." "And why should I trust you?" Sarah asked bluntly. Morrison didn't look offended. "Fair question. I can't prove I'm not a traitor. All I can say is I've been with MI6 for 14 years. I've bled for this service, and I've lost friends to the kind of people we're fighting now." He met her eyes steadily. "Chen and I never got along. She thought I was too aggressive, too willing to bend rules. Maybe she was right, but I'm not a traitor." Sarah studied him, her instincts weighing his words against his actions. He'd fought beside her tonight, taken a bullet, risked his life. That counted for something. "All right," she decided. "But we're doing this my way. Compartmentalized, verified, zero trust until it's earned." Morrison nodded. "Wouldn't have it any other way." He paused at the door. "For what it's worth, Collins, you're handling this betrayal better than most. Some agents would be paralyzed right now, unable to trust anyone, but you're still moving forward, still adapting. Bond chose well when he picked you for 07. After he left, Sarah sat alone with her thoughts. The betrayal stung more than she'd expected. She'd been a cop for 7 years, had worked with partners she'd trusted absolutely. But espionage was different. In this world, loyalty was currency, easily spent and rarely replenished. Her secure phone rang. Bond's voice came through, tired but determined. "Williams briefed me. How are you holding up?" "I've been better, but I'm functional." "Good, because I need you to do something that goes against every instinct you have." Bond paused. "I need you to trust someone completely. Given that we just uncovered a traitor, I know. But you can't operate alone, Collins. You need a partner. Someone to watch your back during the final operation. Someone who's proven themselves beyond any doubt. Sarah looked at Max, sleeping peacefully beside her desk. I already have that partner. Max is exceptional, but he can't make tactical decisions, can't provide covering fire, can't help you navigate the complexities of human intelligence. Bond's voice was serious. I'm sending someone. She'll arrive tomorrow. Her name is Agent Thompson, and she's one of our best. More importantly, she's been in deep cover for the last 6 months, completely isolated from your team. Chen couldn't have compromised her. How do I know this isn't another setup? You don't. That's the point. At some point you have to make a choice. Trust someone or fail alone. Bond let that sink in. Thompson will have authentication codes that only I know. She'll prove her identity to you, and then you'll have to decide whether to work with her. After the call ended, Sarah sat in the darkness, thinking about trust and betrayal, about the impossible choices that came with the 007 designation. She'd been trained to be independent, to rely on her own judgment, but Bond was right. She couldn't stop this attack alone. Tomorrow she'd meet Agent Thompson. Tomorrow she'd have to decide whether to trust someone new. Tonight, she just had to survive the knowledge that her team had been compromised from the beginning, and the summit was 9 days away. Max stirred, coming to rest his head on her lap. His eyes reflected absolute trust. No questions, no doubts. Sarah envied that simplicity more than she could say. The shadows of betrayal were long and dark, and somewhere in those shadows, Corvus was waiting. Agent Rachel Thompson arrived exactly when Bond said she would, 6 days before the summit. Sarah met her in a new safe house, a modest bungalow in Virginia Highland that Chen had never known about. Thompson was late 30s, athletic build, with dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. Her eyes were the color of storm clouds and held the kind of wariness that came from 6 months of deep cover work. Authentication code. Nightingale sings at midnight, Thompson said without preamble. Sarah checked the code against the message Bond had sent through the secure phone. It matched perfectly. Welcome to the team. Though I should warn you, the team is compromised. We are operating blind on half the intelligence, and we have 6 days to stop an attack we still don't fully understand. Thompson's lips quirked in a slight smile. So, typical MI6 operation then. She set down her bag and looked around the safe house. Bond briefed me on the situation. Chen's betrayal, the leak concerns, your suspicion that there might be additional traitors. For what it's worth, I've been completely isolated. If there are other leaks, they're not through me. That's what someone with another leak would say, Sarah pointed out. Fair enough. Thompson moved to the window, checking sightlines with professional efficiency. So how do we build trust in 6 days? We don't. We work together because we have to, and we verify everything independently. If you survive that and don't betray me, then maybe we'll have the beginning of trust. Brutal honesty. I can work with that. Thompson turned back to face Sarah. What's our operational status? Sarah pulled up the tactical map on her laptop, showing Thompson what they knew and, more importantly, what they didn't know. Syndicate is planning multiple simultaneous attacks during the summit. We've identified possible targets, the main venue, several hotels housing delegates, transportation routes. But we don't have specifics on timing, method, or which targets are real versus misdirection. And Corvus, any progress on identifying him? None. He's a ghost with serious operational experience and apparently state-level backing. Every time we get close, he's 3 steps ahead. Sarah's frustration bled through her professional tone. It's like fighting smoke. Thompson studied the map, her expression thoughtful. You're thinking about this wrong. You're trying to find Corvus, but you should be thinking about what Corvus wants. He wants to kill world leaders and destabilize Western alliances. No, that's what Syndicate wants. That's the mission objective. Thompson tapped the laptop screen. But Corvus is the planner, the strategist. People like that don't just want success. They want to prove they're smarter than everyone else. They want recognition, validation, the satisfaction of outwitting their opponents. Sarah thought about the messages Corvus had sent, the taunting tone, the personal challenges. Thompson was right. This wasn't just about terrorism, it was about ego. "So we give him what he wants," Sarah said slowly. "We make him think he's won, draw him out into the open." "Exactly. Set a trap using his own arrogance as bait." Thompson smiled grimly. "It's risky and requires perfect execution, but it might be our only shot." And they spent the next 4 hours planning, using tradecraft that assumed every communication was monitored, every movement tracked. Sarah felt the weight of command settling on her shoulders. 2 lives, possibly thousands more, depending on the decisions she made in the next 6 days. Max watched from his position by the door, his amber eyes tracking both women. He seemed to sense the tension, the stakes, the deadly game they were playing. The breakthrough came on day 4, 72 hours before the summit. Morrison, working independently, had tracked financial transactions linked to Syndicate operations. He'd found a pattern, payments flowing through shell companies to a single offshore account. Following the money backward revealed something interesting. The account had been accessed from a secure location in Atlanta, not a safe house or commercial building, but a private residence in Buckhead. High-end neighborhood, serious security, owned by a man named Alexander Kensington, Morrison reported via the secure phone. British national, relocated to Atlanta 3 years ago, supposedly a private equity investor. But his background doesn't quite add up. Gaps in his history, inconsistencies in his business dealings. Sarah pulled up everything MI6 had on Kensington. Late 40s, elegant, educated at Oxford, with a military service record that was mostly redacted. The kind of file that suggested intelligence connections. "Could be Corvus," Thompson said, reading over Sarah's shoulder. "The timeline fits. Syndicate operations started ramping up about 3 years ago, right when Kensington arrived in Atlanta. Or it could be another misdirection," Sarah countered. "Corvus has been 3 steps ahead this entire time. Why would he suddenly make a mistake this obvious? Maybe he didn't. Maybe this is the trap he's been setting." Thompson's expression was troubled. "He's been testing you, evaluating you. What if this whole thing, the leaks, the ambushes, the cat and mouse game, was designed to push you toward a specific conclusion? To make you think you've figured it out when really you're walking into exactly what he wants?" Sarah felt cold dread spreading through her chest. Thompson was right. Every step they'd taken, every discovery they'd made, could have been carefully orchestrated. They weren't hunting Corvus, he was herding them. "So what do we do?" Morrison asked. "Ignore the lead?" "No," Sarah decided. "We use it, but we assume it's a trap and plan accordingly. If Kensington is Corvus, we need to take him alive and extract information about the summit attack. If he's not, then we spring whatever trap has been set and deal with it." "That's a terrible plan," Thompson observed. "You have a better one?" "Not even slightly." They spent the next day conducting surveillance on Kensington's residence. The house was a modernist masterpiece, all glass and steel, with security that would make a bank jealous. Cameras, sensors, armed guards, and probably countermeasures they couldn't see. "He's hosting a party tomorrow night," Morrison reported from his surveillance position. "Catering trucks, guest lists, the whole society event. Perfect cover for a meeting with Syndicate operatives." "Or perfect cover for an ambush," Sarah added. "Either way, we're going in. Thompson, you'll infiltrate as catering staff. Morrison, your perimeter security, watching for Syndicate reinforcements. Max and I will go in through the service entrance once the party is underway." "What about Park and the rest of the team?" Morrison asked. "They get a different mission, checking the summit venue for explosive devices. It's legitimate work that keeps them busy and away from our operation." Sarah's expression was grim. "If there are more traitors, this compartmentalization should limit the damage." The night of the operation, Atlanta's elite gathered at Kensington's mansion to celebrate something Sarah didn't care about. She watched from a van 2 blocks away, monitoring Thompson's camera feed as her new partner moved through the crowd with practiced ease. "Eyes on Kensington," Thompson murmured into her concealed microphone. "He's playing the perfect host, charming, attentive, completely at ease. Either he's innocent or he's very, very good." "Wait for my signal," Sarah replied. "I need to get inside first." She and Max moved through the darkness, approaching the service entrance from a blind spot in the security coverage. The lock was sophisticated, but Sarah's MI6 training had covered this. 30 seconds later, they were inside. The mansion's interior was as impressive as its exterior, art that probably cost more than Sarah's annual salary, furniture that looked like it belonged in museums, and enough security cameras to make surveillance almost impossible. Almost. Max's sensors were detecting something unusual, chemical signatures that suggested explosives, faint but present throughout the building. Sarah's blood ran cold. This wasn't just a residence, it was rigged to blow. "Abort," she said urgently into her comm. "Thompson, get out now. Morrison, pull back. The whole place is wired with explosives." But even as she spoke, the lights cut out. Emergency systems kicked in, bathing everything in red. And Alexander Kensington's voice came through speakers throughout the mansion. "Good evening, Agent Collins. I've been expecting you." The guests began to panic, screaming and rushing toward exits that were suddenly locked. Sarah's tactical mind assessed the situation instantly. Dozens of civilians, explosives throughout the building, and somewhere in the chaos, Corvus waiting to spring his final trap. "Everyone calm down!" Thompson's voice cut through the panic with trained authority. "I'm with British security. Stay together, stay calm, and we'll get you out safely." Sarah moved toward Kensington's voice, Max clearing the way ahead of her. She found him in a study on the second floor, sitting calmly at a desk, watching multiple monitors showing the chaos below. "The new 007, Kensington said, his accent refined. British, utterly untroubled. "Bond's final protege. Tell me, Agent Collins, do you understand what's happening here? You're Corvus. You've been planning this from the beginning. And now you're going to tell me how to disarm these explosives before innocent people die." Kensington smiled. "I'm afraid you've made several incorrect assumptions. First, I'm not Corvus. I'm simply a facilitator, a banker who moves money and resources. Corvus is someone far more interesting." He gestured to the monitors. "Second, the explosives aren't here to kill these people. They're insurance, to ensure you make the right choice." "What choice?" "The summit begins in 48 hours. Syndicate has placed devices at 7 locations throughout Atlanta. The summit venue, 3 hotels, 2 transportation hubs, and 1 surprise location that will only be revealed at the last moment." Kensington's smile never wavered. "You can defuse the devices here and save these 70 guests, or you can take the information I'm offering and possibly save thousands at the summit. But you can't do both. The timers are synchronized. When I activate them, you'll have exactly 1 hour." Sarah's mind raced. This was the impossible choice Corvus had been promising. Save the people in front of her, or save potentially thousands. The kind of decision that defined what kind of agent she would become. Why? Why any of this? Because Corvus wanted to know if you were worthy of the designation. Kensington leaned back in his chair. Bond was the best for 30 years. His replacement needed to prove she could make the hard calls, could think strategically, could accept necessary sacrifices. Every test, every challenge has been building to this moment. "What will you choose, Agent Collins?" Sarah looked at Max, who gazed back with absolute trust. She thought about her training, about Bond's words, about the 17 hostages at the Peachtree Plaza. She thought about what it meant to be 07. Not just the license to kill, but the burden of impossible decisions. "I choose option 3, she said calmly. Kensington's smile faltered. "There is no option 3. There's always an option 3. You just have to be creative enough to find it." Sarah pulled out her phone, pressing a preset number. "Morrison, execute Protocol Delta." "Confirmed," Morrison's voice came back immediately. Sarah turned back to Kensington. "You see, I've been learning from Corvus all along. He taught me that the obvious trap is usually hiding the real trap. So while you've been watching me, I've been watching you." Morrison has been outside your house for 6 hours, mapping every communication signal, every data transmission, and for the last 30 seconds, he's been jamming all of them. Kensington's expression shifted, the first crack in his calm facade. Your synchronized timers? Sarah continued. They can't receive the activation signal. The devices at the summit venues, MI6 teams, are hitting all 7 locations simultaneously right now. We used your own compartmentalization against you, let you think we were scattered and reactive when really we were just waiting for you to reveal all the targets at once. Impossible. You couldn't have known. I didn't know. I guessed. And then I planned for the guess to be right. Sarah moved closer, Max at her side. You wanted to test me, fine. I learned from every test. The warehouse ambush taught me that Syndicate coordinates their operations carefully. Chen's betrayal taught me that information is a weapon, and you taught me that sometimes the only way to win is to make your opponent think they've already won. Kensington stared at her for a long moment, then began to laugh, a genuine sound of respect mixed with disbelief. Extraordinary. You really are worthy of the designation. His laughter faded. But you still don't have Corvus. I'm just a facilitator, remember? The real architect of all this remains free. For now, Sarah agreed, but you're going to tell me everything you know about him, and then you're going to help us ensure the summit happens without incident. Because the alternative is spending the rest of your life in a deep, dark hole that makes prison look pleasant. The extraction of Kensington took 40 minutes. Thompson got the civilians to safety while Sarah secured the prisoner. Morrison confirmed that MI6 teams had successfully located and secured all 7 device locations. 4 were real threats, 3 were decoys, exactly as Sarah had predicted. Park arrived with backup, his expression mixing relief and exhaustion. The summit venues are clear. Bomb squads are doing final sweeps. But it looks like we got them all. He looked at Sarah with new respect. How did you know? I didn't. I played the probabilities and hoped Corvus's ego would work against him. Sarah glanced at Kensington, who was being loaded into an armored transport. But we're not done. The real Corvus is still out there. Back at the safe house, with 36 hours until the summit, Sarah interrogated Kensington with Thompson watching. The banker was smart enough to know when he was beaten, and pragmatic enough to deal. I've only met Corvus once, face to face, Kensington said. 2 years ago, in Berlin. He's British, former MI6 actually, though he operates under so many layers of cover that even I don't know his real name. Sarah's blood ran cold. Former MI6? Burned out years ago, or so the story goes. Disagreed with how the service was handling counter-terrorism, thought the politicians were too soft, too concerned with rules and oversight. He wanted to create chaos, to force governments to respond with strength. Kensington smiled slightly. Ironic, isn't it? He's using terrorism to fight terrorism. That's not irony, that's insanity, Thompson said flatly. Perhaps, but he's very good at it. The summit attack was never meant to succeed, not entirely. It was meant to showcase vulnerabilities, to test new Agent Collins, and to prove that even MI6's best efforts can be anticipated and countered. Sarah processed this. So the real target isn't the summit at all. It's something else, something we're not watching. Kensington's expression confirmed her suspicion. He's been playing chess while you've been playing checkers, Agent Collins. Every move you've made has been predicted, accounted for, turned to his advantage. Even now, even with this conversation, he's 3 steps ahead. Then we change the game, Sarah decided. No more reacting to his plans. We force him to react to ours. The next 24 hours were a blur of activity. Sarah coordinated with Park's team, with Atlanta PD, with Secret Service, building a security net so tight that not even a ghost could slip through. But she also did something else, something risky and possibly suicidal. She sent a message through channels she knew Corvus would be monitoring. You wanted to test me. I'm ready for the final exam. Summit opening ceremony, main venue, high noon. Let's finish this. 007, Bond called immediately. Collins, what the hell are you doing? Drawing him out. You said it yourself. Corvus wants to prove he's smarter than everyone. I'm offering him the ultimate prize, a chance to beat the new 007 on the biggest stage possible. That's incredibly reckless. That's incredibly necessary. We've stopped his immediate attack, but he'll just plan another, and another. The only way to end this is to end him. Sarah's voice was firm. I'm going to that ceremony, and I'm going to find Corvus. With or without approval. Silence on the line. Then Bond sighed. You really are my replacement. That combination of brilliant tactics and suicidal bravery was always my trademark. A pause. Good luck, 007. Try not to get yourself killed on your first major operation. The summit opening ceremony was scheduled for noon at the Georgia World Congress Center. Thousands of attendees, dozens of world leaders, security so tight that even the air felt monitored. Sarah moved through the crowd with Thompson and Morrison flanking her, Max's sensors working overtime to detect any threats. This is insane, Thompson muttered. We're basically using you as bait. That's exactly what we're doing, Sarah agreed. Corvus can't resist. His ego won't let him pass up this opportunity. And when he shows up, when he springs whatever trap he's prepared, then we adapt. That's what 00 agents do. The ceremony began with all the pomp and formality such events required. World leaders took their places on the stage, security forces positioned strategically throughout the venue, and thousands of cameras captured every moment for global broadcast. Sarah stood in the security corridor watching, waiting. Max sat beside her, alert but calm. Somewhere in this building, Corvus was watching too. She could feel it, the weight of his attention, the anticipation of confrontation. Her earpiece crackled. Collins, we have a situation. Park's voice was tense. Security just flagged someone entering the building with credentials that check out but feel wrong. Former MI6, retired 5 years ago, listed as having clearance for the event. Name? Thomas Ashford. Age 52, sterling record during his active years, currently working as a security consultant. But here's the thing, his retirement was abrupt. One day he was a senior field agent, the next he was gone. No explanation in the official files. Sarah's instincts screamed. What does he look like? Park sent through a photo. A distinguished man with silver hair and sharp blue eyes that seemed to look through the camera lens with knowing intelligence. That's him, Sarah said with absolute certainty. That's Corvus. Where is he now? Heading toward the VIP section, second floor. Collins, if you're right, he could have access to... Sarah was already moving, Max racing beside her. They took the stairs 3 at a time, ignoring shouts from security personnel who didn't know her designation. Thompson and Morrison were seconds behind, weapons drawn but concealed. The second-floor VIP section was elegant and deadly. Close proximity to world leaders, limited security presence to maintain the illusion of informal gathering, and multiple exits for quick extraction. Sarah found him standing at a window, watching the ceremony below. Thomas Ashford turned as she approached, and his smile was everything she'd expected. Charming, dangerous, utterly confident. Agent Collins, right on time. You're as predictable as Bond said you'd be. Former Agent Ashford, or should I call you Corvus? Sarah kept her distance, her hand near her concealed weapon. Max stood ready, his body tense. Names are such arbitrary things in our profession. I've been so many people that I sometimes forget which one was real. Ashford's accent was pure BBC English, educated and refined. But yes, I'm the one you've been hunting, and you, my dear, have been exactly the opponent I hoped for. Why? Why any of this? You were MI6. You swore the same oaths I did, and I meant them. At the time, but years of watching politicians squander our sacrifices, watching terrorists walk free because of legal technicalities, watching the world become more dangerous while we tied our own hands with rules and oversight. Ashford shook his head. I realized that the only way to save civilization was to tear it down and rebuild it properly, by killing thousands of innocent people, by proving that the current system is fundamentally broken, by forcing governments to acknowledge that soft power and diplomatic solutions are insufficient against existential threats. Ashford gestured toward the ceremony below. Today's attack was always meant to fail, Agent Collins. Its purpose was to test you, to measure whether Bond's final choice was worthy of the designation, and I must say, you've exceeded expectations. Sarah's tactical mind was racing. Ashford was too calm, too confident. He had something planned, something he was waiting to reveal. So what now? You surrender? I take you in, and the whole thing ends? Hardly. Ashford checked his watch. In approximately 30 seconds, you're going to face the real test. The one that will define not just your career, but possibly the future of MI6 itself. Sarah's phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number, containing only coordinates and a timer counting down from 25 seconds. She pulled up the location, her elementary school 3 miles away. Her blood froze. "You're a monster," she whispered. "I'm a realist. The summit was always a diversion, Agent Collins. The real target, the one designed to break you, was always going to be somewhere you couldn't ignore, somewhere that would force you to make the ultimate choice." Ashford's expression was almost sympathetic. "You can stay here and arrest me, finally capture the ghost you've been hunting, or you can race to that school and try to save 200 children before my device detonates. But you can't do both. Choose wisely." 20 seconds. Sarah's world narrowed to a single point of perfect clarity. This was it, the impossible choice Ashford had been building toward all along. Her mission was to capture Corvus, to end his threat permanently. But those children... She looked at Thompson and Morrison. "Take him, dead or alive, but take him." "Collins, wait," Thompson began. "That's an order." Sarah was already running, Max at her side. 15 seconds to reach her vehicle, maybe 8 minutes to reach the school if she broke every traffic law and got lucky. It wasn't enough time. She knew it wasn't enough time, but she had to try. The drive was a blur of sirens and speed. Sarah's tactical mind already planning the approach. Max sat in the passenger seat, his body tensed for action, trusting her completely, even though he couldn't understand the stakes. 6 minutes later, improbably, she screeched to a halt outside Westview Elementary. The school was in session, children visible through windows, completely unaware of the threat. Sarah's phone showed 30 seconds on the timer. She ran toward the building, pulling up the schematic on her phone, trying to identify where Ashford would have placed the device. Boiler room. It had to be the boiler room, centrally located for maximum damage. 20 seconds. She found the maintenance entrance, kicked it open, and raced down the stairs. Max's sensors were going crazy, detecting the chemical signature of explosives. 15 seconds. The device was sophisticated, military-grade composition, timer display counting down with digital precision, and a tamper mechanism that would detonate it if she tried the wrong approach. 10 seconds. Sarah's training kicked in, her hands moving with practiced precision. She'd defused bombs before, but never with this little time, never with so many lives at stake. 5 seconds. Red wire or blue wire? The classic dilemma, and she had no time to trace them both. Her instincts screamed at her, and she made the choice. 4 seconds. She cut the red wire. 3 seconds. The timer stopped. The device went dark. The school was safe. Sarah collapsed against the wall, her hands shaking with delayed adrenaline. Max pressed against her, whining softly, sensing her distress. Her phone rang. Thompson's voice came through, strained but victorious. "We have Ashford. He's secure and singing like a canary now that he knows his leverage is gone. How are the kids?" "Safe. The device is neutralized." Sarah's voice was hoarse. "How did you take him?" He didn't expect Max to be wearing a tracking device that let us triangulate your location. When you ran, Morrison called in bomb disposal. They were on scene before you arrived, cleared the building silently while you were defusing the bomb. The kids never knew they were in danger. Sarah felt tears pricking her eyes. Relief, exhaustion, the weight of impossible decisions finally catching up to her. The bomb was real? Yes and no. Real device, but the timer was remotely controlled. Ashford could have stopped it at any moment. He wanted to watch you make the choice, wanted to see if you'd prioritize the mission or the innocence. When you chose the children, he knew you weren't like him. That's when Morrison put him down. Put him down. He's alive, barely. Ashford tried to detonate the device remotely when he realized we had him. Morrison stopped him the only way available. Thompson paused. It's over, Collins. The summit is secure. Ashford is neutralized. And Syndicate is scattered. You did it. Sarah stood slowly, Max rising with her. She walked out of the school basement into bright Atlanta sunshine, seeing children playing on the playground, completely unaware of how close they'd come to catastrophe. She'd made the right choice, not the easy one, not the one that would look best in the reports, but the right one. That's what being 007 meant. 2 weeks later, Sarah stood in MI6 headquarters in London, receiving her official commendation from the director himself. The summit had been a success. Syndicate's network was dismantled, and Thomas Ashford, Corvus, was in custody, facing charges that would ensure he never saw freedom again. But the victory felt hollow somehow. Sarah had learned truths about espionage that she wished she didn't know, that allies could betray you, that enemies could be former friends, and that the hardest decisions were the ones where every option was terrible. Bond found her on the headquarters rooftop, looking out over London. Max lay at her feet, contentedly chewing a toy. "How does it feel?" Bond asked, joining her at the railing. "Heavy," Sarah admitted. "The designation, the responsibility, the knowledge that I'll face more choices like that summit day. It never gets lighter," Bond said quietly, "but you learn to carry it better. You learn that sometimes saving everyone isn't possible, but saving someone is always worth it." He smiled slightly. "You made the right choice, Collins. Not the strategic one, not the one headquarters wanted, but the right one. That's what makes you worthy of the designation. Chen's betrayal still bothers me. How do we trust anyone after that? We don't. Not completely. But we trust enough to function, enough to build teams and execute operations, and we verify everything always." Bond looked at Max. "Though I notice you have one partner whose loyalty is absolute." Sarah smiled, scratching behind Max's ear. "He's the only certainty in this whole mess." "Then hold on to that. In our world, certainties are rare and precious." Bond straightened. "You have a new assignment, by the way. Syndicate may be dismantled, but its remnants are scattering worldwide. MI6 needs someone to track them down, to ensure they don't regroup, someone with proven ability to handle the unexpected. When do I leave? When you're ready. You've earned some rest, 007. Use it wisely because it won't last long." After Bond left, Sarah remained on the rooftop, thinking about her journey from Atlanta cop to MI6 agent, from Sarah Collins to 007. She thought about the shot that had silenced the training range, the choice that had defined her at the summit, and all the impossible decisions still ahead. But she also thought about the children who'd gone home safe from school, the world leaders who'd completed their summit unharmed, and the lives saved by her willingness to make the hard calls. Max looked up at her, his amber eyes full of trust and love. Sarah smiled, feeling some of the weight lift from her shoulders. "Ready for the next mission, partner?" she asked. Max's tail wagged, his way of saying he was ready for anything, as long as they faced it together. Sarah Collins, Agent 007, stood on that London rooftop and looked toward the future. The storm had been silenced, but new storms were always brewing, new threats, new challenges, new impossible choices. But she'd proven she could handle them. She'd proven she was worthy of the designation, worthy of Bond's faith, worthy of the legacy she now carried. The shot that had changed everything was just the beginning. The real legend was being written with every mission, every decision, every life saved. And Sarah Collins, the woman who'd been the only one among legends, was ready to become a legend herself. The end.